You're now watching Sports Bettor's Paradise on the BetRivers Network.
All right, Jimmy, out along with Paul Stone as we kind of share theories and handicapping approaches when it comes to college basketball. And, you know, one of the big stories the past week or two has been these top 5 teams, highly ranked teams, being upset. You know, a lot of them are happening on the road. You know, for argument's sake, we're going to include Marquette, who was a big favorite over Butler at number 11. That was the one home team that got upset. But Iowa State beat number 2 Houston, 57-53. Nebraska beat Purdue, number 1 Purdue, 88-72. Mississippi State beat number 5 Tennessee, 77-72. Central Florida defeated number 3 Kansas, 65-60. We mentioned Butler beat Marquette. That's the one home team that got upset, 69-62. TCU beat number 9 Oklahoma, 80-71. And I'm even going to throw this one in there, Paul, because it's such a big brand and they've dominated this conference so much. And that's Gonzaga as a 7-point favorite, losing at Santa Clara, 72-71. A&M, unranked team over a ranked team, beat Kentucky, number 6 Kentucky, 97-92. And TCU beat Houston, number 2 Houston, 68-67. So what do we make of this? I'll call this the Paul Stone. You ever wake up with a hangover? Well, there's 2 spots here. For one, the highly ranked team get a wake-up call. Sometimes when you go through a loss, you get the attention of your team, and the other is the hangover, the celebratory dog that won. How do they follow it? How do they follow it up? So that's the thing that we're looking at. And first of all, before I get into some of my data, Paul, do you pay attention to see how teams? This could be for football also that we talk about. It's emotional. It's college level, and you know, a team in a celebratory mood after pulling a big upset, or a team in a wake-up spot, you know, coming off of a tough loss.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, Jimmy, in my mind anyway, in college basketball, these teams really have, in many cases, probably most cases, a real home-road dichotomy, if you will, in their performance. So teams perform, you know, at a higher level more often than not on their home floor than on their opponent's home floor. And when we get into this early stage of the conference season like we are right now, most of these teams and most of these leagues have only played anywhere from 3 to 7 conference games. A lot of these teams, especially the high-powered teams that you're talking about getting knocked off, they have not played a large number of true road games. They've played some of the non-conference early season neutral site tournaments where they play high-caliber competition, but on a neutral floor. And in some cases, the teams you're talking about, it was only their second road game of the year when they're losing those games. Surprisingly, as the betting favorite. So I think it takes time to get accustomed. It's hard to win on the road in these major conferences, and I think these teams, even these superior teams, these highly ranked teams, just have to get acclimated to playing on a team's true road floor. So I think that speaks to it a little bit.
All right, the highly ranked team in the wake-up spot. So Houston gets upset by Iowa State. Then they go to TCU and lose a close game. So they lose outright. Purdue, followed up their Nebraska upset. They win by 17. They were laying 18.5. So they came out strong. They were up 20 at half, but fell got backdoored, basically, on that big number. Tennessee, after being upset at Mississippi State, they came out. They were up 6 at half, but Georgia shot the lights out, and it fell 6, and they come short of the 7.5. Kansas, I'm like Mark Emmert handing Bill Self the trophy, calling Kansas City. Kansas, after being upset against Central Florida, they followed up and covered easily against Oklahoma, 78-66. Marquette, after being upset by Butler, woke up and beat Villanova. Now, Tennessee did not cover against Georgia, but Paul, they came out much sharper, much more sort of focused, energetic, and motivated, and easily covered the first half number. Same thing with Houston. Say, well, Houston followed up and they lost again on the road at TCU, but they came out. They were winning by double digits. A double-digit lead by Houston. They don't lose many of those, but they did lose. So I did see a sort of a bounce-back effort, especially in the first half, to the point where these teams the last couple of days are 11-0 in the first half money line. I understand that's a lot there, but first half money lines, and those money lines are much shorter prices. And I understand the parlays and things like that. Some people don't like to do them. It's maybe a sort of a house's favorite thing to book. But if you are stringing some of those money line parlays, teams come being upset in the first half. In the first half, it's been very profitable for me. But the one that I've seen a better result is the team with the cloudy head after partying. That's the hangover spot, because Iowa State, after beating Houston, Iowa State, after beating Houston, they were beaten by Oklahoma. Nebraska, after beating Purdue, they got beat by 18 by Iowa on that Friday night game. Mississippi State, after upsetting Tennessee, they lost at home to Alabama. BYU and Central Florida was a push after Central Florida followed up their Kansas upset. Butler, after upsetting Marquette, lost at home outright to Seton Hall. TCU, after their upset of Oklahoma, they followed up with a win against Houston. I know I'm going along. Santa Clara, you might remember this one, Paul, but Santa Clara, after upsetting Gonzaga, gets blown out by St. Mary's. They were down 29 at half in that one. A&M, after upsetting Kentucky, lost at Arkansas outright as the betting favorite. TCU, after upsetting Houston, lost in overtime in Cincinnati. 6-2-1 if you're going against, you're fading the hangover team, the team that pulled off the upset, that's in a celebratory mood. So you did have some of those cash. So anyway, you've got some of that. But the thing that I've really had a lot of success with is that big favorite, that big team. And you know that, Paul. Sometimes those coaches, they have to lose. Those young players have to lose before they start buying in to what their coach is selling at times.
Yeah, I mean, there's parity in college basketball, no doubt about it. Everybody has some good players. I mean, we've talked about him a little bit going to the mid majors, the smaller schools, but like Shahada Wells at McNeese State. I mean, that guy can play anywhere, and he's playing for the McNeese State Cowboys, and they're a team. They'll have to win the Southland Conference tournament to make the NCAA tournament field, but they certainly look like a good choice to do that. So everybody's got players, and they are college kids, and they get caught up in the euphoria of victory. And especially when the fans rush the floor, there's probably some against the spread angles there coming off of a floor rushing home victory. I'll say this about Houston and Gonzaga. Houston, one, they are not quite the same team, in my opinion, that they've been the past few years. And two, it's kind of like Dorothy, we're not in Kansas anymore. I mean, they're not playing in the American Athletic Conference at this point. They're in the Big 12. And the Big 12 is a difficult road to hoe and very difficult on the road, if you will. So when you go to an opponent's home floor in the Big 12, there just aren't any easy outs. So Houston's finding out what life is like in a major conference. They're still a very good team and still a top 10 caliber team that has the capability with that defense that they play to make a run in the tournament. But they are going to have some losses, obviously, in the Big 12. And then Gonzaga. I mean, to think right now, they're kind of a borderline NCAA tournament team with what Mark Hughes, what he's done there in Spokane over the last 2 decades or whatever it's been. They just are always the class of that conference, and they just tear those teams apart. And now it's not the case. So there is parity. And when there's parity, there's opportunities for bettors, especially if you look at that underdog side.
And two instances in where these teams are 6-2-1 against the spread, fading these teams, and that is Washington State coming off of that unbelievable win against Arizona. The court rush fade there. Washington State is at Stanford tonight. Stanford is laying a short 3 points, so Stanford is the team to back in this spot. And then Penn State would have upset against Wisconsin, number 11. Penn State goes to Columbus, Ohio. We're projecting to be about Ohio State, the Buckeyes, to be about 8.5-point favorites. So fading Washington State and Penn State, backing Stanford and Ohio State. Thursday and Saturday. Both are home teams. I know both you and I look to find these spots where we can find home teams, and that's the focus of your handicapping approach today, and that is not just home teams, but home dogs. So you got a home dog, your team that's underdog at home, that crowd is trying to do a little extra to pull off that upset. I know that you've got some data for us. And we'll call it the Big 6 plus 2, the Power 5 plus the Big East, and then you're throwing in the WAC and the American as well that you've recorded some of this data from.
Yeah, I looked at these 8 conferences, and this is up to date through last night's action through Wednesday, January 17th. And teams in these 8 conferences that I looked at as the home underdog against the spread, Jimmy, 57-28 against the spread. And then if you look at home dogs specifically, getting 3.5 or fewer points, so small home dogs, 23-8 against the spread. So there's really been some value backing these teams. Looking at the most profitable conferences, the WAC and the Pac-12, home underdogs in those leagues thus far 9-2 against the spread. Home dogs in the Big Ten up to date 7-3 against the spread. You know, the line maker, I'll say this, the last few days, the line makers has seemed to tighten up their numbers. You know, they're like coaches or anybody else. You know, they're going to make adjustments. They're not going to just sit back and be an ATM for bettors and let people just come in there and print money at their shop, so to speak. So if you're simply using power ratings, whatever your source might be, and there's several out there, but if you use power ratings, some home dogs, in my opinion, are getting fewer points than the pure numbers might suggest. In some cases, these teams are even the favorite. But I'll say this: there's still going to be opportunities going forward betting some of these home underdogs. I just don't think you'll be able to employ that blanket approach where you just blindly bet all home underdogs and still be profitable. So I think you have to be selective. You have to pick your spots. You know, I like to support the home dog in one case where the road favorite has not performed particularly well on the road. That's a pretty obvious approach, but when the road favorite has not played that well and the home dog perhaps is a little bit better at home, and especially also when a team is on the visiting team is on a 2 or more game road trip. If they won the first of those games and they're entering their next game on the road seeking back-to-back road victories, I believe there's a little bit more value on the home team in those cases. We've got a situation that may or may not present itself present an opportunity this weekend in the Pac-12. Got Washington State tonight traveling to Stanford, currently a 3-point underdog there at BetRivers. That game again tonight, which is Thursday, January 18th. And if Washington State, if they pull that mild upset, the Cougars are going to be traveling to Cal on Saturday afternoon. In that game, I currently project the Cougars to be about a 2-point road favorite. So in that scenario, my position, if that number is available, I probably wouldn't take less than 2. But if Washington State, especially if they win tonight at Stanford on Thursday, January 18th, and then they're a road favorite at Cal on Saturday, if I'm able to get 2 or more points, I'll be looking to take Cal there. So, I'd like Cal even more, just to add another layer to it and not to present too many potential scenarios. But if they lose tonight in their game at home to Washington on Thursday, January 18th, if they're coming off a loss, I would like Cal even more because they're the desperate team. They're playing at home. They're playing a team that won their last game on the road. A lot of moving parts there, but Cal plus 2 might be a look that will give us an opportunity to bet one of these home dogs this coming Saturday.
Paul, what about tonight's game in the Big Ten where Michigan is at home catching 2.5 against Illinois? That is a home dog of 3.5 or less. Did you give that one tonight any consideration?
I looked at it like I make numbers on using various sources, including my own power rankings. I make numbers on all these games, and I made that line 5. So I think that's just an example of the line maker just saying, man, everybody's just hammering us on these home dogs. we're going to make them pay a premium. So
Okay.
I just don't think that 2.5, in my mind anyway, even though it meets that 3.5 or under home underdog criteria, it just doesn't seem like the right number. Michigan's been they're off a victory. I think they're in their last game at home against Ohio State, but Michigan has really been choppy. They have not played good basketball at home or on the road. So again, I think we really have to be selective and kind of pick our
Okay.
spots. But it'll be interesting to chronicle that one.
Let me throw a couple of other ones at you on Saturday that I'm projecting to be. I'm not sure about Creighton at Seton Hall, if Seton Hall will be a home dog or not. Man, we just keep sliding Seton Hall, and they just keep winning. Although they benefited from Rick Pitino not being on the sideline in the midweek game. The Johnnies had 0 points at the under 16 first media timeout. So, speaking of the Johnnies, they're at home versus Marquette. I think they might be catching a little bit of point, but I know one that's going to be catching points. This team has improved over the course of the season, and that is Iowa will be catching points at home against number 2 Purdue. Any of those that fall into your category? I know they're projected to be home dogs, but or will these be teams that you want to see what that line comes out and give them consideration?
Yeah, I mean, they all are games that I've got jotted down just because they're home underdogs. That Seton Hall team really playing well, maybe still a little bit under the radar with some college basketball bettors out there. And Creighton, they're kind of up and down. They certainly have flexed their muscles at times, but the Blue Jays are certainly not infallible, and that's a pretty good trip from Omaha, Nebraska to the East Coast. So I like Seton Hall there if they're getting a couple or more. And then that Iowa-Purdue game, I mean, that's an interesting – I'm a little bit scared. I want to get at least and I might be off here. I'm just doing this from memory. Want to get at least 5 or so points with Iowa. But the way Zach Edey's been playing these last couple of games, man, he has really been a presence. He's been impacting the game on both ends of the floor, and he's kind of showing why he's maybe again college basketball's top player. But certainly Iowa is a team that's played well at home that I'll be looking at. And then the other one that you mentioned was, I think, St. John's.
Yes.
At home, and they'll be playing Marquette. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Marquette. The one concern I have there, and I don't know, what his quarantine will be or what his status will be for that game. Will Rick Pitino be on the sideline in that game for St. John's? If he's not on the sideline, that would be a pass for me. But if he's back, Marquette for a while, up until about 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, Marquette looked like a potential Final Four team, and they still very well might make that type of run. But they've shown some chinks in their armor the last couple of weeks and have shown that they're just humans. So that would certainly be one. If Rick Pitino is available and it's clear that he's going to be on the sideline as the head coach, I'd certainly take a look at St. John's, getting a couple or more points.
It's a huge factor, okay? His assistant, the former Manhattan head coach, an Italian name. All Italian college basketball coaches were not created equally. Your proof is in Newark, New Jersey on that one, because I was expecting a really good game, and that was really, really ugly. St. John's in Seton Hall. I mean, St. John's could have beaten Creighton. I mean, on that Saturday afternoon game last week, they lost a tough one by 1. But yes, Pitino has to be coaching there. And I'll throw one in. Last week we looked at UCLA and Arkansas as being under. They rebounded after getting destroyed by combined, 70, 80 points, whatever it was. UCLA won at home against Washington. Arkansas held on to win against A&M. And boy, UCLA was the beneficiary of 4 technicals against Arizona State last night as they won that game at the end. I am looking to fade the Bruins again on Saturday with Arizona. Arizona, you're never going to get that much of a bargain on the price, but trust me, UCLA is still not that good. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott. We do it each and every week through the Final Four. We're giving our college basketball handicapping approaches. And Paul will talk about, he talks about his power ratings and all of that. We'll talk about his approach and how he streamlines it with 360 plus Division I teams. It's you cannot cover all of those extensively. So we'll talk about that next week. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy Ott here on the Sports Bettor's Paradise on the BetRivers Network.